Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for being here. If you're here live, I appreciate being here. If you're watching after the event, thank you for being here also. This session is called How to Be Yourself, How to Love Yourself, and I am going to be doing some questions. Some of you have pre-submitted questions. Thank you for those. I look forward to getting to as many as I can. If you are here live or after, just let us know in the chat. Let me know that you're here, who you are, where you're tuning in from. And also feel free to leave a question if there's a question that you have now or it arises at any point during this session. And if it's after the session, I will still get to the questions posted below. So bring your questions. I look forward to them. Just a quick news flash. I will be soon launching a new offering. So if you're interested in doing some deeper work with me and the community, then get on the mailing list. And the easiest way to know if you're on the mailing list is, do you get emails from me somewhat regularly? If you do, you're on it. If you aren't, this is the quickest way to pop in. I'll try and put this actually as a quick link here in the comments as well, so that you can actually just click on the link directly. But there will be a pre-enrollment for people who are on my list that will be being announced in the coming days. So click that link and then you can hear of how you can be involved. Got a few people saying hello. Hello to Debbie in Oregon. Hello to Samir in Kenya. Thanks for being here. I know it's late. And Phyllis is in Missouri. Welcome to you. Welcome to you, all of you just joining us. We're getting going here. I am going to be taking your questions. I have some pre-submitted questions. Lisa's here. Happy Friday back to you. Preeti's in Bangalore, India. Welcome. And I don't know if I'm saying this right. Thea is in London. So much love for the work and guidance offer. Thank you, Jackie. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Katarina's with us. Good seeing you after quite a while. Yeah, you're in Slovakia right now. Wow. So we've got the global village convening here. I appreciate you all being here. Lisa's in the free state of Florida. Welcome. So let's get in with a little bit of a question. And the other thing I'm going to say is I'm actually going to be asking you some questions here today. I spend a lot of time trying to answer questions. I love questions. They're the kind of lifeblood of learning. I come to you, as a student of these kind of questions. The reason that I want to talk to people about authenticity and self-love and boundaries is because I'm also learning about these things. They seem important to me, and sometimes they seem really hard. So together we can learn from one another. So I'm going to start with a question. I'm going to sort of give my answer to it, but I want you to pile in the comments as well. The question is, I have a question about self-love. It's quite basic. Self-love is something I continue to find hard to conceptualize and even harder to put into practice. What for you is self-love? So I'm going to also turn that over to you. What for you is self-love? What have you learned about self-love? What are you learning about self-love? What do you find hard about self-love? Do you find it even hard to know what self-love is? This can sometimes be an experience, not just in the world of personal growth, I'm sure in the worlds of, politics and psychology and other worlds, but where phrases get used a lot, and maybe it lands and it means something for you, and maybe it lands and it doesn't mean much for you, right? I remember when I first lived in Boulder, Colorado, everyone seemed to be talking about healing. That was so healing. That was such a healing event. I'm feeling more healed. And, maybe I was coming from a bit of a different context, right? I was coming from the social enterprise world of London and England, and people just didn't use that word. That word didn't get used in my family. It didn't get used in my upbringing. It did not get used in my schooling. It didn't get used at university. I just had not really been around it. So it was sort of bizarre for me because people often were talking about that word, with reverence, and clearly there was feeling behind it, right? So they're having this sort of poignant experience, like, wow, that was so healing for me. Meanwhile, I'm sort of having the experience, I feel a bit disconnected. I feel kind of confused. At my worst, I might even feel a little judgmental, a bit like, wow, is everyone kind of a little bit high here, right? No, I mean, it's Colorado. Literally, they could be high. But I just mean, is everyone kind of like getting a bit too excited? Like, yeah, maybe that was a good event, but like, was it really healing? I mean, that sounds almost like such a big world. But of course, healing could be profound and transformative. It can also be subtle. It can be macro healing, micro healing. I mean, it can be all sorts of things, right? And any of these terms, self-love, healing, whatever other terms you're using, they're all probably essentially contested concepts, right? Which is the kind of fancy way of saying there's no one definition of them. And so, we may not even have shared reality when we're talking about them. And it might be that, your experience is completely personal and unique to you, and that's fine and great as well. For me, the something kind of dawned on me, that the penny dropped, as we say, with self-love, when I noticed that there were things that I would do for other people that I wouldn't do for myself. And I started to get more curious about that, ways that I might just drop everything, right? If someone was, kind of needing me, like, I don't know, needed to pick it up at the airport, or it was going to hospital or something, I'd be like, yeah, of course, I'll just down tools and I'll go be there, and that's a great thing. I like that about myself. I like that about other people, right? It's good, I think, to be able to down your tools and go and help people in need and their hour of needing help. But maybe I noticed that when I was in my hour of need, I wouldn't just down tools and say, buddy, you're struggling today. Why don't you, take some time off? Why don't you go rest? Why don't you get some help? So it's not always true that the help that I need is the same as the help you need, right? You might have a broken leg and have some ability requirements, right? I might have a broken heart and have some emotional requirements, you might need some help deciding which holiday you want to book, right? I might need some help deciding how to go to IKEA and not get stressed, right? So I'm not trying to subjectify here, meaning I'm not trying to just create equivalence around everyone's needs. But if you just notice that there are things that you would much more easily do for other people and not for yourself, that might be one way into the self-love conversation, right? There's another way into the self-love conversation, which is much more to do with self-worth, right? So can you sort of like look in the mirror and notice, hey, I'm a valuable human being and I see myself and I care for myself, and I'm not going to allow myself to engage in ways of being that I wouldn't want to engage. I wouldn't want to let my friend engage with, my friend whom I love, right? So that's another way into self-love, is to sort of go third person and imagine that you're trying to be a good friend, right? You could say, can I be a good friend to myself? Can I be a good friend to an actual friend? Sometimes it's easier to imagine that way. Like, would I want them to be doing this? Would I want them to be, working all these hours? Or would I want them to be alone for this amount of time? Or would I want them to be, part of this group where it doesn't seem like the group really gets them? So why are they continuing to engage in that? And then you can sort of turn that around. And we're not trying to turn it around judgmentally. We're trying to turn it around with, compassion and non-judgment and curiosity to the best extent that we can. For most of us, those are works in progress. We sort of say, hey, well, how come I'm hanging out in this group when I don't think they really get me? And is it that they don't get me because I haven't really let myself be easily gotten, right? Are there things that I haven't, shared or revealed the impact of? For most of us, there is good work to do there ongoingly. But maybe it's not easy for them to see me because maybe actually we have a kind of difference. And this group is constellated, I've had this with clients before, where the group is really all about, competitive sports. And actually they're now at a stage in their life where competitive sports doesn't quite do it for them. Really, it's more about getting together and being social. And so that their values are starting to shift a little bit from the group. Or maybe the group is all about drinking and you're actually sober, or maybe you're not fully sober, but you just don't really need to go get drunk now. You actually just want to kind of connect with people in a bit more of a sober way. And so you're not feeling so held and seen in the group, right? So a self-loving thing here, it may not be that it's one path that's obvious. It might just be the self-loving thing is to address the issue. So maybe you need to reveal something and speak up. Maybe you need to take a risk and spend less time with the group and start exploring some other groups. Life can unfold and can support you in the process, but the sort of self-loving thing is not to just to kind of like not look at it. There's another aspect of self-love, which I would call something like seeing myself clearly, right? Seeing myself lovingly and soberly at the same time. So part of self-love can sometimes be, when you're tired, I'm going to go rest. When I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat, and all this obviously presupposes that you can, right? Sometimes you're struggling so much that you're like, yeah, I want to go eat right now, and I don't actually know where to get my next meal. So I'm also have compassion for that. But the loving side might be, like imagine like you had a loving mother with you right now, and some of us might know what that's like, and some of us might not from our childhood. But if you don't have that, just kind of imagine as best you can, even if it's vague and hazy, what would the loving thing be? But then there's also this kind of clear-sightedness, right, where I don't actually have to see myself different than I am, right? This is sort of the warts and all part of self-love, that I can see myself in places that maybe I don't always love myself easily, or that I'm frail or vulnerable, or that I find life difficult, or that on some measures I am not... I don't know if I even want to use that word, but there are certain objective measures in life, right? And maybe I am the weak link on the sports team right now, or whatever the thing is. And that's actually okay. I see it, but I don't see it and put myself down. I kind of see it and I love myself in it, right? So I might love myself in my limitation or in my frustration, or I might try my best to love myself even though I'm acknowledging, right? Sometimes I do this to myself. I'm like, you're kind of moody. You're kind of moody, buddy. And that's maybe okay. Like maybe I have a right to my moodiness right now. Maybe I don't have to be, in the same good mood all the time, right? Or maybe sometimes self-love is, you tried hard today and not a lot happened, right? I sometimes have days where things feel really in flow and ease and productivity kind of happens. There's other days where, I'm sitting at my desk and I'm maybe trying to write or create or, get a tax return done, and it's just not moving at all. And for me, often the practice there is the self-love is just to notice, hey, buddy. And I often talk to myself that way. Hey, buddy, you showed up today. The world doesn't know. The world doesn't really care. And tomorrow might be a very different day. But today you tried at something and it didn't happen for you. And I'm just going to acknowledge you for making the effort and for seeing it, right? So I think sometimes self-love doesn't have to be big and conceptual. It can just sort of be noticing yourself, imagining that you're a little bird on your shoulder, looking at yourself and sort of saying, hey, like be supportive, be encouraging, notice yourself, whether you get the result or not, right? For some of you, you might have gone on 100 dates and none of them has led to a second date or a third date or, some beginnings of a relationship. That's a lot of effort. And the self-loving thing might be just to notice that and acknowledge it. That doesn't also might mean that you're not frustrated or that sometimes you are down on yourself. But the self-loving thing is to kind of like to notice. Now, sometimes the flip side of this, the self-loving thing is to sort of say, hey, you've been on the couch for a little bit. Maybe you need to get out. Maybe you need to go meet some people, or kind of like, you've been on a bit of a Netflix run. That's okay. But like you're getting a bit stale here. So we need to mix it up a bit. We need to change the energy, right? So self-love isn't always just praise and appreciation. That's obviously a part of it, and part of it is also the loving encouragement, right? Sort of like the best of the archetypical maternal paternal energies is it's the love and encouragement, and it's also sometimes the kind of like the holding and the structure and the boundaries and the sort of like you could maybe do a little better at this, but I'm not saying it in the same way as like, and you're bad and you should be better and you should be this. It's sort of like, hey, let's see, like yesterday I don't know what your sport is. Yesterday you did your golf round and here was your score. Let's see today. Maybe you can do better. But you get like so much of it, you can say the same things. This is why when we get to the structure inside this of the inner critic, you often say, well, how is that structure talking to you? Because you can take the same sentence and say it very differently to yourself, right? One can be backed with a sort of loving presence towards yourself, even when the medicine is hard, right? Sometimes life is hard. Sometimes the medicine is hard, right? Sometimes the doctor has to say, you know what we gotta do something, because you can't keep going on like this. If you keep going on like this, we're going to do surgery, or we have to do this thing, right? Sometimes we're ill. Sometimes we don't even know how to solve the illness, and we just have to say, well, the best is you need to like stop working right now and you need to rest, right? Or you need to get more active. And the self-loving thing is to say, hey, you need to get active every day. You don't even know how to do that, but that's kind of what you need to do. So that's how I sort of think about self-love, is being that honest as best you can, authentic, loving presence to yourself. You don't need to make it better than it is. You don't need to make it worse than it is, right? That's the self-sobriety piece. You offer your encouragement. You notice when you make effort, even if the result doesn't happen. And you do your best to be a friend to yourself, That's what I think. Welcome if you're just joining us. I'm going to jump into some of the comments here. This was a question about what, at its most basic level, is self-love, if you don't kind of get it conceptually, let alone practically. And if you are just joining us, I also have this banner up across the screen here, and I've posted it into the comments section as well. This is an invitation to get on my mailing list if you're not. And if you're not, that would mean you don't get emails from me ever, or perhaps you get emails but to an old email account, so you haven't been seeing them. If that's the case, click on that link and it will just take you to what I'm calling my launch list, because we are getting warmed up here to launch a new program, and people on my email list will be the first to hear about it. Let's say a few hellos. Gail's in Canada. Rachel's in Bedfordshire in the UK. I actually went to Bedford for the first time last year knowingly, kind of meaning I have a sense I might have driven through it before, but actually stopped there for the day. And really beautiful. I was quite impressed by the river and the castle and the architecture. Sarah, hi from Italy. Welcome. Sandy is in Seattle, Washington. Thea, you pronounced my name great. Well, great. That was a good guess. So this was the question I asked is, what is self-love? Lisa says, asserting myself and doing what I love to do. Yes, I get it. I like it. Sarah says, part of self-love for me is considering my needs as important to other people's needs. Yes, I remember being in a training. This is some time ago. I'm going to say probably closer to 15 years than 12 years back in England. And the sort of question, this was about sort of social leadership, social enterprise. So that the question was like, what are the needs here? Like, so what are the needs of the community? So rather than me being like, hey, I've got my idea and I'm going to go to the community and say, hey guys, this is what you should be doing. It's much more of a listening exercise, like going, whatever the community is, whether it's, a political community or your family community or, a community of women. It's like the orientation is I'm going to listen and sort of try and discern what the needs of the community are. And then someone reflecting back, but don't forget, Jack, you're part of this community, so your needs are also part of the equation. And it had never really occurred to me that the answer to the question, what's needed here, should also include the self, right? Whoever the self is in that situation. So that was the start of I think a fairly profound and ongoing learning journey for me. So I like that you brought that in. Dayla says, permission to be. Yes. Samia says, caring for myself before trying to worry about everyone else. Yeah, absolutely. Bernadette is in Sparks, Nevada. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Karen says, I've started to listen to my thoughts and they are very negative. I'm now practicing self-compassion. Right on. I really have not loved myself and have criticized myself a lot. Now I'm trying not to judge. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we want to be aware of that, like, inner critic in the back door, as I sometimes call it, where once we start to notice how we talk to ourselves, it can be easy to have like a secondary commentary to say, well, you should talk to yourself much nicer. And then it's sort of like it keeps feeding the inner critic structure. So yeah, compassion is the name of the game. And sometimes it does get a little harder before it gets easier, meaning when you start to notice the noise that you might have tuned out of or just taken as normal, for an initial period of time, that can sometimes be quite tricky, because it's almost like the level of noise can go up. There's one other thing I just want to kind of throw in here, which, I want to know a lot more about, and I think increasingly will bring more of this aspect into my kind of inquiry and work with people. So one of the strengths of the personal development, personal growth, transformation world, the world of coaching, is it focuses on the individual, right? So the site of development is the individual. So we're not going to try and have a sort of sociological conversation about trends at large. We're going to say, who are you? Who are you becoming? What is your authentic desire? Like, what is the edge of development that is wanting to come online for you? How do we support that? How do we facilitate it? And there's a lot of power in the approach of, I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to, locate agency here with me, and I'm going to, make efforts to practice this new way of being, or to drop this persona, or to relax my inner critic. The weakness of that approach is that it can sometimes be detached from social context. So the question, why do we have an inner critic, right? There's a developmental sort of answer to that. The inner critic is a way of internalizing the standards of our family, our parents, our culture, our education system. There's pros and cons of that. Some of the pros of that are, we learn how to be socialized. We learn how to, go to a restaurant and say table for two, know what that means. We know how to take turns. We know how to maybe talk and listen and reciprocate and, not steal things and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of benefits of that. But it also means we internalize a lot of stuff from society that then, when you eventually come into coaching, it's like, okay, so we're going to locate that with you, but it may not have started with you, right? Meaning you may have strong inner critics that you were enculturated into, right? So maybe mom or dad or a guardian or an older sibling or grandma or granddad or however far you want to go back. Perhaps they had strong inner critics, and that became part of sort of like your inheritance, so to speak, or the way that you were enculturated, the way that you were raised. And by the way, that might not even be like a thing that they were aware of, right? If you have a really strong inner critic, it's not always that you go around saying, yes, I have a strong inner critic that I'm trying to relax. Sometimes people just take that to be what life is and who they are before it's kind of, more deeply examined or explored. But there's also a way that the inner critic, you might have taken on perspectives that are from society, right? Like if you think of some of the traditional advantages that men have enjoyed and the privileges that men have enjoyed, there are going to be a whole set of perspectives about the relationship between men and women, and men's place in society and women's place in society. And some of those perspectives are going to be internalized by men and women, and some of them aren't going to be helpful. Right? And some of them are going to be self-critical in effect, because there's a societal critique that you're also kind of rubbing up against. So, much more to say and know and learn about that. And I want to be a student of that, and, a lot to learn. And I'm just sort of putting that in there, right? Because sometimes, you might have worked some of these things really hard on your own, and maybe you're getting traction and maybe you're not. And just to sort of say, hey, whenever you do individual work on something that has a social context, you're also doing that work on behalf of all of us, whether all of us realize it or not, right? Any time that you're working on something that was handed down to you, or any time you're working on, relaxing, maybe a school teacher told you that you weren't good at music, and that's always been a kind of a bit of a dent in your confidence around music. And now in your late adulthood, you are working to relax that and to claim whatever musicality and expression you have. You're doing that on behalf of everyone, and it doesn't always mean that you need to make progress. Sometimes just the pure act of, I'm going to try and I'm going to show up, it has meaning, and it has meaning in ways that I think can often go unacknowledged in the broader context. So hang in there, keep at it. Kiara says, for me, self-love is being so in tune with myself to understand what would really make me happy and pursue it. Yeah, I like that. Self-attunement, self-listening. Karen, hi, welcome. Thanks for being here. Rachel says, I'm kinder to myself when things go according to plan. I can accept I don't know some things, and that doesn't make me stupid. Yes, I like that. This is really great, guys. Thank you for chiming in here. And there's a lot of people saying, yep, I agree. Lisa says, knowing yourself and your strengths and weaknesses is part of self-love. Yep. Bernadette says, I'm so hard on myself. Well, good awareness, and don't be too hard on yourself in that awareness. Heather's here from Michigan. Welcome. Rachel says, I still struggle with allowing myself to feel angry and sad. Yeah, stiff upper lip. Don't show others that you're not perfect. Yeah. Totally. Well, there's a whole kind of bias in that, just I think I'm going to say Euro-American culture. They're probably the cultures I know best, and I might not be getting the contours of that quite right, but just, yeah, there's a lot of societal appreciation of, sort of stability and sort of self-monitoring and not rocking the boat too much. And yeah, we sometimes pay a personal price for that, or even knowing what to do with difficult experiences. When you look at it, and it's not like I've looked at this in the deepest detail, there's a lot of people who are serving time, like jail sentences, prison time, for acts of vengeance, right? Where they felt aggrieved in some way and they've done something possibly, heinous and incredibly violent, but on the back of a sense that there was some kind of wrong that was done to them. And I think culturally we don't have a great way of dealing with, how do we deal with the parts of ourselves that are at times, or even just in a moment, jealous or hateful or vengeful. I don't think we have a mature discourse about that, but that is part of the human experience, because in some experiences, some people are going to come better off than others, right? And you can just kind of take that out at large. There are some people, there are some groups, classes, use any categorization of people, and there's sometimes people who are going to have it better or easier in certain ways, or more power or more ability to influence. And so, yeah, I hope that we can gradually become a little more aware of how do you deal with some of these more difficult aspects of experience and give them space so that they ultimately don't have to, hopefully as many times, end up in such, drastically cataclysmic and life-shattering incidences. And I mean that sort of on all sides of the fence. So yeah, let's up-level that conversation. All right, I'm going to take another question here. Thank you for chiming in. Keep the comments coming. If you're joining us, this is a live stream. I'm doing some question and answer. We have some pre-submitted questions. Here's a question. How do I conquer fear of expressing my wishes in a relationship? Seeing or hearing from them more often. I think I will alienate my partner if I speak up. Yeah. That is a good question, and it's a difficult territory for lots of us. So maybe let's just start with a presupposition in case that's helpful. So one presupposition you could have in the area of relating, right? And this could be true for friendship as it could be true for intimate relationship. I want to have friends or people I relate with who care about what I want. Now, that doesn't mean they have to want the same thing. It doesn't mean that, they have to fulfill every need and want that I have. In fact, no one can, right? So part of our sobriety is owning I'm going to have some wants and desires that may not be fulfillable, or certainly may not be fulfillable by the person in front of me right now. And I'll do my best to take some responsibility for that. So I'm not just going to put that on another person. But if we put it to the other extreme, if you don't really have an authentic interest in what I want, it's probably a limit to why we would be authentic friends or partners, right? So if in the process of you exploring what your wishes are, you find out that the other person doesn't really have an interest in that, and I mean, maybe not just like an in the moment that you raise an interest, but let's say you've perhaps approached it more than once, perhaps at a time when you are already somewhat connected, right? So it's not just that you've kind of thrown it in on the back end of a conflict or an argument, or that you've kind of been beaten around the bushes, that you've done your best to be sort of plain and direct about it. Then as difficult as it may be to learn that, you may have some information that's actually important to you. Right? So you're right. There's a risk anytime that we go to say, hey, here's a thing that's up for me, or hey, here's the thing that I want. I might find out that you don't actually care that much about it. I might find that I can't quite put it in language that is going to sort of have you respond well to it, But I can just do my best. That's all I can really do. And, if there's some way that you need to be able to hear it differently, right? Like let's give a slightly bizarre example. if you hearing my desires is actually based upon them being written down, let's just say hypothetically, slightly strange request, but for you, it's easier if you can process these things, I don't know, when you process down your inbox. So actually, if I email you and say, hey, I would like to go on this kind of date in the next 2 weeks, and I email it to you and it actually that lands and you take some action, then okay, so be it. I found a way to communicate with you that works for you, right? Or if for you, let's say that we're in an intimate relationship. Like once a week, it works to have a coffee or a walk or a glass of wine or just sit down together and kind of just say, hey, what do we want? What desires do you have? Like what desires for connection or date or adventure or passion? Fill in the blank. And that's kind of the easiest way to hear it. But if you gave me that same desire, like in the middle of my workday, maybe I'm going to be less receptive to it. Right now, in an ideal world, I might say, I love that you shared your desires with me. I'm rammed at work, but I will get to it. Or I will talk to you about this on, Friday lunchtime when we have our weekly meeting. Okay, great. But, we're not always centered enough or kind of in tune enough to be able to do that. So, I'm just saying include the possibilities of doing it sort of in a good way. I don't mean good in a kind of moral right, wrong, just in a conducive way for the other person, right? So sometimes people are more receptive at certain times of the week or when they're not working or when they're not stressed. Certainly for guys, that's probably going to be a factor. But if we're including all that and really there's not a lot coming back, you might just have to name the thing that's a little uncomfortable to name, which is something like, I'm having the experience that you don't seem that receptive to my suggestions or the things that kind of I want for our connection. Now, maybe they push back, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But at least you're doing your best to be as simple and direct about what your experience is. And, if you've pushed this far and there's really not a lot coming back, I think you might have an answer anyway, right? Maybe this isn't kind of particularly aligned. There is another possibility in there, which is what is that person's connection to their own wants and desires, right? Let's say I'm a super responsible person, right? So in my life, responsibility sits here, but authentic desire, maybe here on a good day, but maybe often I'm not even in touch with it, right? So all day I'm taking care of business, taking care of my responsibilities, super responsible, taking care of finances, taking care of the kids, taking care of the community, taking care of my aging relative, taking care of, running the city council, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. Now you want your authentic desire. Do you know the last time that I had an authentic desire? I don't even know. Do you think I'm doing all this for fun and games? No, I'm showing up super responsible. So that's just one other thing that you can put into the mix. Like if the other person doesn't have a connection with their own desires, it might be hard for them to connect with yours. But, if that's not really in the picture, it's learning how to become a bit more comfortable with upsetting things. And if you upset them to the point that they completely break, you had something that was fragile in the first place. It's not that your actions created that fragility. I think it's that your actions revealed that fragility. If the only way that I could sit on this chair was having to sort of like hold some of the weight off on my legs, but as soon as I actually sit down, the chair breaks, the chair wasn't really ready to support, right? So in relational terms, the sort of fancy phrase for this is load bearing. What load can the relationship bear? And different relationships can bear different loads. And also sometimes in different cycles, they can bear different loads, right? Over time, relationships might be able to load more, or maybe if you're, financially doing better than worse, or if your health is better or worse, or if, other factors are supporting the connection. But learning how to be a little bit more comfortable with the discomfort and with a sense being a bit more disagreeable, right? Like, hey, there's a thing that's not really working for me. And you also find out about people. Now, oftentimes people are going to be defensive with you. Let's just be honest, right? I'm saying, hey, there's a thing that I think's a problem. I want something you're not giving me. It might be hard for me to hear that as anything other than a criticism, So that's why I'm saying you can give it a little bit of space to see, well, okay, maybe the defensiveness flares up. Maybe, they sleep on it, take a few days. Maybe they realize that. Maybe there's no way around that defensiveness, and I can only hear it as a criticism of myself. And, well, maybe that's actually going to be a bit of a deal breaker, because I'm not willing to persist in relating with you and never getting anything that I want because of your defensiveness. Now, I might have compassion and space for being with your defensiveness. And if, we want to look at that or you want to look at that, I'm super supportive, and I might have time. I might say, hey, well, this is important for me, but I don't need to make a decision on it today. But just know this is important to me. So this is not going to kind of go away, but I'm willing to take some time to see if there's other ways that we can work with this. But yeah, it's, I think, not being afraid of fragility, kind of meaning if something's already a bit fragile, let's realize that, because it's going to be hard for you to turn to that in your moment of need or deeper desire, or it will just continue to support a way of being that isn't authentically you. So if it only works if you completely suppress or repress your needs and wants, okay, but we kind of have a sort of baked in inauthenticity there that I don't think over the long term is going to work for you, because you've got some consciousness about the fact that your wants on there. Now, one final thing is just to be aware that when you're not used to being in touch with your needs, there's probably or wants, let's say. I mean, they are slightly different, but for this, I'm sort of using them interchangeably. The way that you get into connection with them might not be particularly well integrated in you, right? So maybe you might sort of ask something from a place of like, oh, I'd really like to go on an adventure date, right? So there might be a lack of confidence or kind of, connection with your desire. Or you might basically be sensitive enough that you're already anticipating the pushback. So that's kind of present for you as you go into asking about the thing. Now, that's okay. In some ways, the only way around is through, meaning you can only be where you are, right? And so over time, it's sort of like, yeah, if you and I go into the gym today for the first time, we're not going to lift that big, heavy weight, right? We've got to kind of like train up to it. And so that's okay. It's just appreciating that sometimes it's darkest before the dawn, meaning it's hardest to do this stuff at the beginning, because you're both trying to like connect with, well, what is my desire? How do I even say it? And I'm probably in relationship with someone that may possibly not even care that much. Now, that's kind of a lot, right? Whereas if we take this out, you might be like, well, I'm well practiced. I know what I want. Maybe I journal about it several times a week. Maybe I'm bringing it into all sorts of relationships, friendships, work relationships, and intimate relationships. So I'm practicing a lot. And now I actually have a bunch of people in my life who are receptive to what I want. So you kind of compare those two things. One is going to be a lot harder. So yeah, just realize sometimes people react to the kind of, it's like the unconscious dynamic that you're expecting their pushback. So you kind of almost unconsciously invite it forward by your anxiety in a way that you or they may not easily be able to articulate. And that's a little unfortunate, but it's just sometimes part of the terrain, it seems. So I wouldn't let that stop you. Just kind of get curious and try to practice in the places that it's easiest, right? Just like if you and I were, I don't know, taking up running, right? We might not go for the most precarious, downhill mountain trail, right, where we've got to like avoid, serpents and jagged rocks. We might just say, well, how about we run on the grass, right? Because that's going to be easiest on your joints. In the same way, some people are good at being receptive to your desires, right? And then notice who those people are. You may not have any in your life right now, but even just paying attention to that. If you think of who would it be easiest, even if it's just least hard is what we're calling easiest, who would it be least hard for you to say, hey, I've got this desire, kind of, are you up for it? Like, would you like to do this thing? And if possible, make it as winnable as possible, meaning make it as kind of simple and as opt-in-able as possible. So if it's that you want to have some kind of adventure experience with someone, maybe we can hold off on the, 6-week world tour. Maybe we can just, do an escape room or, some kind of walk or hike or class or paint and sip or, something that's like, I don't know, 2 hours. That's not like taking a huge amount of time, energy, and resource on their behalf, so that it's kind of an easier way to get into it, right? So also just, check your own sobriety about, can you make it easier for someone to come in and sort of say yes, basically. So I'm curious, what are your guys' experiences? Is that making sense? Is there any of you for whom this is a difficult territory? Has there anything improved your ability to name what it is that you want? Let me know. All right, I'm just going to jump back into some questions and comments. Kadir, hi, welcome. Gina, hi and welcome. Heather, hi and welcome. Let's how can we grow self-love? I think that's a practice. I mean, I talked quite a bit to how do we maybe think about what self-love is. But I guess I'm thinking of it a little bit like a muscle, right? That we can entrain and we can practice. There's also an identity level to self-love, right? Meaning the more that I sort of look at myself in a loving way, that is going to have a ramification throughout my life. So the more that I practice loving myself in the small ways, which might be not pushing myself too hard, or resting when I'm tired, or saying enough for today, I can pick this up tomorrow, or talking to myself more kindly, or feeding my body better nutrition, or moving my body a little bit more, or fill in the blanks. The more it becomes a kind of integrated identity, that's how I orient to myself. So anything that is in my life that is only in there on the basis of an unloving self-orientation, self-image, starts to get eroded, right? I start to kind of question, well, why am I running around doing all this energy for this thing when actually it's not really now in kind of good identity with who I am, right? Why am I part of this group? Why am I part of this community? Why do I take on this particular role? So there's a kind of inventory of my life and examining which communities, roles, responsibilities match up with who I am now. Now, not every time can we let go of responsibility that might not quite feel self-loving in this season, because perhaps there's something else that we're honoring, right? Perhaps we're honoring that we made a commitment. We made a 3-year commitment, and there's still a year to run. And even though I've kind of lost the energy for it, or it doesn't really feel aligned anymore, I'm going to see through the commitment, right? Or maybe my work doesn't feel particularly self-loving, but at the end of the day, it supports my family and I'm going to stick at it. But I might start to create a possibility space within myself for something new to come in, right? Or just to start imagining, okay, within the next few years or few months, depending on horizons, I might start to think about adding something that's more self-loving, right? Maybe I'm going to reclaim a day and I'm going to say, I will do this job, but I'll do longer hours for 4 days because I need a day a week where I have it for myself, right? Or I have it to spend more time with my kids, or I want to start a side hustle or a different business, or I don't even know what I want. But what I notice is for years I've been talking about wanting something else, and I actually need to get more intentional about it. So I need some calendar time. So my Fridays are going to be about the job search. And until I actually put it there like that, I'm just going to kind of keep talking about it. So sometimes you need to kind of, change things structurally, right? Sometimes you might notice that you're in lopsided friendships and it only really works because, the other person is in a sort of superiority and you're in a bit of an inferiority and you're kind of ready to bust out of that. Or perhaps it only works because you put the effort in and you notice if the effort isn't being put in from your side, it actually kind of falls away. Sometimes you notice that's true, that the effort is required from your side, but you actually do like having that person in your life and you're willing to do that little bit of extra lifting, but you're now doing it consciously. You're not doing it unconsciously, so that the orientation to it is a little different, right? You might have friends that are not as developed as you are in their social instincts, right? So maybe they're going to reach out less, or perhaps they are they're less expressed than you are, or they're more introverted or shy or whatever. And that's actually okay, because you know that when you get together, you both enjoy it. And there's a way that you connect that's important to you. So you do a bit more of the lifting. But maybe there's ways that they are there for you. Maybe the way that they're there for you is they don't really expect much of you, right? So you could text them next week or next month or next year, and they would receive it the same way. There wouldn't be a sort of like, well, why haven't you been in touch with me? So sometimes there's also this kind of Just noticing there's many vectors of reality, right? There's many vectors of friendship and relationship. It doesn't always have to be one for one, right? It's very easy to sort of notice the things that you do and give them a bit of a higher priority, and sometimes not notice the things that other people do and give. Sometimes the way that people give to you is they have a ton of opinions about what you're doing in your life, but they keep their mouth shut. And that's actually giving a lot, and it takes a lot of energy for them to do that. So, you can be curious, or sometimes the self-loving thing is to say, hey, Marlene, we've known each other for 3 years, and I just want to check in on our connection. And I want to clear anything that stands in the way of it being the most sort of authentic friendship it can be. And I have a few ideas, and also I want to hear from you. And you might hear that and think, Jack, do people talk like that? And no, people don't talk like that in general, in my experience. But this is your life, right? And these are your friendships. And these are your invitations. And so, yes, some people do talk like that and are willing to. And you can also be an invitation. If you want a different kind of friendship with someone, right? Perhaps you want to see them more or less, or perhaps you want to stop, I don't know, going out and having beers with them because actually you would rather be in the fresh air, and you want to say, look, let's just stop going to the pub and why don't we go, hiking or, fishing or whatever your thing is. You see what I mean? It's bringing a little bit more of your creative agency to the things that you want. And you're doing that because they're actually authentic desires for you. And part of loving you is noticing those things about yourself. All righty. Welcome if you've just joined us. I'm going to be going back to the comments here. There's lots of them. Thanks. Keep them coming. Let's see. If you do have a question, one of the things you can do just to make it easier for me is just you can put question at the front of it, or Q, just so it stands out so that I can see it as I scroll. Sal says, I found that talking to ourselves in that self-care and self-loving way, I end up speaking that lovingly way to others I care about, and it's received much better by loved ones. That's awesome. I like that. It's having that impact. Very cool. Chantal is in the Netherlands. Welcome. Saskia's from Belgium. Holga, hello from Ingrid, and Holga from Oklahoma. Welcome to you guys. Jennifer's a dear friend in Houston, Texas. Tanyeli says, thanks for the examples, Jack. Really helpful. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Rochelle says, I'm always saying to people at work when they are being hard on themselves that they need to be their own best friend. I need to remind myself too. Yes, I think that is a concise way of saying it. Let's have a look here. I'm going to go back to my pre-submits. Thank you to those of you who pre-submitted questions. If you are just joining us, I'm also going to place here in the chat box. I'm testing myself. Let's see if that goes in. I should have just posted a new comment. And I'll just do a quick screen share here. If you click on that link, this is what it's going to bring you into, and you can just click here, put your name and email address, and you will be the first to hear when the new program I'm running launches, and getting all the information on that. And it will also be the most promotional offer to enroll in the program. So that link is also across the bottom of your screen. If you're watching this after the event, it will still be live. If you haven't gotten emails from me in a while and you used to, and it wasn't because you unsubscribed, then you may also want to just opt into this, because perhaps something is interrupting your getting emails, and I'd love to be in touch with you. Okay, let's get another question here. Hi, Jack. I don't meet men often. Those I do meet are either married or too young. This is made even worse with my chronic shyness. How is the best way to overcome this? Okay, so there are a couple of questions here. Let me just come back onto the main stream here and stop sharing the screen there. So So it's kind of two parts to this, right? So one, I think, is about overcoming shyness, and one is about sort of meeting different types of men, right? And maybe there's a place that they intersect. So my sense, and so I'll just own, probably shyness hasn't been the biggest problem in my life, right? Generally, I have enjoyed engaging with people, but I do find there are certain contexts within which I find myself shy, and I don't always find that easy. Sometimes for me, that happens when I'm in a social situation that is somewhat unstructured, like maybe going to a party, but there's no real like welcome committee, right? So sort of like you just kind of like walk in and there's sort of like the thing is already ongoing because other people got there first, and it's sort of like, okay, so I see there's maybe like some food and some drink, but I guess it's kind of self-service, but like it's almost like the social protocol hasn't really been established. And so my social instinct feels a little uncertain exactly about kind of how to operate and what's expected and kind of where's my place in this, and should I start off just kind of talking to someone? Should I get a drink? Should I get myself a drink? Am I here on my own? Am I here with other people? What are they experiencing? Maybe if they're also feeling a bit anxious, sometimes my empath might pick up on that. There's a tendency for me in those situations to eat and drink more than I might, just because I think it's a way of dealing with the social anxiety. And then sometimes my inner critic can be kind of hard on myself with that, where it's like, why were you kind of overgorging? So that's just part of my own kind of experience around sort of awkwardness, and then maybe finding myself in conversations that, let's say, are more small talk than big talk. And that's fine in the sense I believe there's a place for small talk, right? So I don't think life is only about big talk. Sometimes small talk can be the on-ramp to just, connecting with someone or kind of bigger talk. But sort of if it doesn't have a way of going beyond small talk, that can also be kind of awkward. And then it can feel awkward knowing how to gracefully leave a conversation that isn't really alive. But maybe I'm leaving that conversation for sort of more solitariness. And then I have sometimes had the experience like, are people really aware of how self-conscious and solitary I feel right now? I also have had the experience where it's the other way, which I like a lot more, which is I am on my own. Perhaps I've got my drink here and I feel good and fine about it. And I'm actually okay. And I don't need to step into a conversation in order to kind of soothe my social anxiety or to fit in. I much prefer that situation. But it's not always obvious to me kind of which way it's going to go. So all of that to say, I think it's allowed to be however shy and awkward as is happening. And I notice that I do better when I own it and don't try and push it away or make it need to be otherwise. So I sometimes call this authentic shyness. Don't underestimate in the context of dating that some people find authentic shyness attractive, right? And there's all sorts of dynamics in dating, but just throwing one out there can be that, if you're a woman who dates men, you might find that you're attracted to confidence in men. That's one thing. And men might find that they're attracted to your shyness, right? To actually a sense of like, hey, maybe I can support you in this situation, or maybe my humor or ability to connect can kind of draw you out or make this more interesting, or it's okay that I'm noticing the impact I'm having on you as you're feeling shy. That's actually okay. It's good. It's so. Just to kind of normalize that, right? And even sometimes it might be more attractive in certain ways than you realize. I think it's also okay to say to someone, like, hey, I don't really know anyone here. Like, can I chat with you? Or like, do you know anyone here? Or, it's a sort of like a way of presencing your experience so you don't have to disconnect from yourself in the connection with someone else, right? So sometimes just saying, hey, I feel a bit shy, or I don't know anyone here, or, would you like to come and get a drink with me, or, anything like that. And even if it's kind of fumbled, maybe it's okay. And never underestimate that a lot of people's confidence isn't always authentic, right? And I used to joke with people that, confidence is a poor man's or a poor woman's authenticity, right? Meaning that at a certain stage of development, we might get more interested in authenticity and a little less hypnotized by confidence, right? Sometimes the most confident people front of house are the most insecure back of house, right? Meaning that when they're on show, they can seem to be, a star of confidence, just kind of radiating confidence, and maybe they're actually incredibly insecure about things. And that's also fine, right? You have a right to be however confident and not confident, or mix of secure and insecure, right? And we're all somewhere on those spectrums at different times. I've also been an entrepreneur, and I know there's times where you can feel really confident and unstoppable, like, yeah, I'm going to change the world. And then other times where it's like, what am I doing? And how is this ever going to work? And people are relying on me to try and pay them, and I don't even know how to do that. And what was I thinking? And then someone else confirms that, where they're like, what were you thinking? Why didn't you just go get a job? And yeah, all of that can be really difficult. So I guess I'm just trying to normalize some of the experiences of shyness. Now, there could be certain practices that allow you to be your own authentic expression. Like maybe you notice, yes, you might be authentically shy, but you're also perhaps repressed or suppressed at certain times with that. And that's what you want to go to work on. You want to go to work on expressing yourself, or finding your voice, or singing, or doing activities that push you outside your comfort zone, so that your shyness or reticence doesn't actually stop you doing some of the things that are nourishing for you, right? So maybe you push the envelope and you consciously practice doing things that feel uncomfortable to you, and that's why you're doing them. And you get that if you wait in life always to feel comfortable, you will miss something about life, right? Because life isn't always a comfortable first process. And for some of us, we can get a little bit hypnotized to our comfort. And it might even be undistinguished, right? Meaning it's an unconscious value system that we're kind of holding back there, that, I need to feel comfortable. Of course, we all like to feel comfortable, right? And it has its place. And for some of us, learning how to feel more comfortable is its learning. But if for you, yeah, I tend to get a little bit kind of comfortable, and I do the kind of safe thing, and I do the thing that doesn't have me really stand out. And in a group, I always sort of like kind of stand against the wall, or I never like let people know who I am, or I never put my hand up, or I never volunteer. Then your practice could be like, I'm going to be the first, right? I'm going to be the first to say hello. Even if I stumble some word that isn't even hello because I'm that shy about it, that's also okay. I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to do the thing that I wouldn't normally do. I'm going to go and perform at the open mic, or I'm going to write a piece of poetry, or do you know what I mean? That you just take it on as a practice. And the great thing about practice is practice can be really bad because you're practicing, right? The only way to get better at something is to practice. So you have permission to just be wherever you are with it, right? What I call permission to learn. So that's on the practices side. That's on the kind of like owning your authentic shyness, being where you are. Sometimes just naming it can actually make it a lot less so, right? That's the beauty about naming our experience, is it can have us feel more connected. You may also find there are more authentic environments, right? If you sort of own your authentic shyness and everything you get is a pushback about why aren't you more confident, maybe that's not really the right community of practice for you. And maybe it's a community of practice that lacks a certain depth and awareness. Life is not only about being confident, right? And oftentimes people's confidence is to cover up their frailty and vulnerability, right? You can be really confident, right? But life is still going to have its way with you, right? You can be super confident, and next month you could get some kind of life-threatening disease. And life can put you on its back. Life can do all sorts of things, life, God, universe, however you think of that. So you might be the most confident person. And then, okay, well, do you feel so confident now that you can't speak, or that you can't hear, or that you can't communicate, or that you can't run, or you can't sing in the way that you used to, or you don't look the way you used to, or there's all sorts of ways that life can humble you if that's what you kind of need. So, authentic confidence, great, but confidence that is really, let's say, superiority, arrogance, that's its own, spiritual awakening possibility. So don't be put off by other people's confidence that's really a sort of subtle form of superiority wrapped up in I'm going to put you one down, but I don't necessarily name it accurately, but that's the sort of feeling tone you have around people. I'm pretty sensitive with my feelings, and I kind of mostly intuit when I'm around someone if I sort of notice like, I just feel less good about myself around this person. At my worst, I could take that on, but maybe at my best, I notice, I don't know if that's about me. And it's okay that I'm impacted because I'm sensitive. I'm going to feel it. But maybe that's actually a little bit more over there with that person. Maybe there's something about me, holding my ground or articulating my value in the face of someone that feels superior. But maybe it's also just not mine to take on. Now, the other part of your question was about men. And I think you said you tend to attract men who are too young or men who are married, right? So one way of looking at that is if we're holding like too young as like you wouldn't want to get into a relationship with them, we could say both of those categories is really like unavailable men, right? Unavailable in the sense they're not really available structurally for the kind of relationship that you'd want, right? Either they're too young or they're too married. You could add too old. There's all sorts of things. Sometimes that is just a sort of difficult season, right? In some seasons, life seems to give you a whole set of things. You're like, this isn't really what I want. I keep asking for vanilla ice cream and you keep giving me chocolate. It's not really what I want, right? And sometimes the way through that is to still be grateful. Say, okay, thank you. I'm grateful that you are bringing men into my life. And I'm checking in with myself, and my authentic kind of conversation guidance to myself is I'm still looking for this kind of man, right? And so it's actually about not not fully saying yes to something that you're actually a no to, but not also just having to push it away. Sometimes there might be, a young man that it's actually, it's not about trying to develop a partnership with them, but there's some flavor that they bring into your life, and that's actually fine. That's what it is. There's a little, spark or something to learn, or, so you can sort of stay open-minded if there's something that it will bring you, even if it's not the ultimate thing that you're looking for. Sometimes it can be an opportunity for self-examination, right? Like, what might be in me that I'm having this sort of unavailability keep showing up, right? Now, we want to do this as a loving inquiry, right? So not, why am I a bad person or down on myself, or the classic framing of this, what am I doing wrong, right? This isn't I'm doing it wrong. It's like, maybe there's something else that I can awaken to, right? Maybe the unavailability actually works because it's sort of safe, right? It's safe, and we all want to feel safe. So good that you want to feel safe. And actually, the way that your system is sort of keeping you safe could be that it's bringing this unavailability so that you don't actually have to fully engage with the real possibility of a relationship. That's possible. Get curious. You can journal about that. You could get reflection from trusted friends or associates or, a coach or a therapist. Have that as a living inquiry. Does that seem true to you? And you don't have to answer it today. You can let it live in the background of your life. You can hit your journal over a period of weeks and months and just sort of see, I kind of question into it, be with it, let the question resolve in you. It could be life is offering you the opportunity to open up your script, sort of meaning actually you've had these sort of set parameters and ideas about the age of person that you want to relate to, and life is actually saying that's not fully true for you, right? That's another possibility, right? There are obviously all sorts of relationships that can constellate around age gaps, and that's totally allowable. So that might be another direction of inquiry, right? There's some people for whom it seems the way that they relate is they tend to either be in relationship with someone who is much younger or much older than them. And that's just kind of their true path and soul path. And part of that is actually accepting yourself and accepting the truth of we do have a good connection, right? And it might not be so immediately acceptable to other people or the community or my family, but actually there's a truth here, and that's what I'm going to pursue. So, that can be one possibility. Is there a way that you're underrepresenting yourself or something about, we came in earlier talking about true desire and authentic desire, right? Sometimes there's a way in dating that people are sort of friendly, but not necessarily true to their desire. So there's a way that they sort of present themselves with like a nice persona, right? Which could be like, friendly girl or nice woman or something like that. And so that's sort of what they put forward. And so what they get back is not that they're going to be met so fully by someone's authentic desire in their direction. So you could just get curious, like, the way that I'm putting myself into dating and out there how true is that to me really? Is there any parts of me that maybe I'm leaving out? Is there a more desirous or wild one or rebellious one or intense one or deep one? Is there anything like that I'm sort of leaving out? And so there's a sort of depth of connection that's a little less possible. And then the last piece, and this goes more generally in dating, is sometimes there is just a structural thing, right? Meaning, certain places have like imbalances in the dating market, right? So there's certain places that have many more men than women. There's certain places that have more women than men. There's places that have more men of a certain age. There's places that have, men who are there on kind of like short-term work contracts. So they're more likely to be at a certain, stage of their life, let's say, or they're only there half the time, or actually you're kind of rural. And so your dating pool is a lot limited, and authentically you want to make more efforts to get into bigger dating markets, right? So you're actually going to plan to do a trip, every week, every month or quarter, whatever it is, to a bigger place so that you can connect with different types of people. So sometimes there can be that in the background. In this instance, where it seems to me that it's a little bit more of an unavailability phenomenon, I wouldn't probably go to that first. I would get more curious about, are there ways that unavailability feels safe, or are there ways that I'm unavailable to the dating process, right? We sort of turn it around and get just really curious about the unavailability. Am I unavailable? Are they unavailable? Do I fear availability? Can I discern emotional availability? Can I discern structural availability, right? So someone could be emotionally available to you, but structurally unavailable, right? So that when married guys have girlfriends, that's often what that is. They are sort of showing a kind of curiosity and heart connection, but maybe they're not actually structurally available because they have no intention of not staying married. So bring your curiosity to the process. All right, thanks for the question. I'm going to dive back in here. I'm going to try and catch up a little bit if I can. Karen says, brilliant, thanks, Jack, for your wisdom on the inner critic. I'm happy that was landing with you. Lisa says, why are women afraid to speak up? I mean, lots that we could explore with that, and lots that I think I want to learn about that. We simplistically have women wanted to be heard, meaning have men or society at large wanted to hear women, right? Have they been represented in the structures that have most of the voice, right? Whether that's the parliament or the board or the civic association or the CEO role or the C-suite. And obviously historically, no, and we're doing our best to kind of address that, and that's still a work in progress. Speaking in gross generalization, women tend to be higher on agreeability than men, so they are probably less likely to speak up if it's going to be a contentious point of view, or even just if they fear feeling disagreeable, or because actually they have a lot of lived experience that when they are disagreeable, they don't get praised for it. It's not like, wow, thank you for your, countervailing view. You might have been labeled as, difficult or mean or bitchy, or you tell me and fill in the blanks, right? So I think there are lots of reasons why women are afraid to speak up. And I think we all should be in the business of wanting women to speak up more. And what can we do to have that happen? Because we're all better for it, right? This is not just a zero sum of, the more women speak, the less men speak. It's like, no, this is actually the more we all speak, the more we have the tapestry of all our voices and contributions, and we have all the bits that have been left out, and that's important. We want to have these different experiences and perspectives. That's why you want to have a diverse board, and obviously, gender and sexual orientation, they're just parts of that. There's many ways that we can talk about diversity, because otherwise there's all these things that we don't get to be in touch with, because sometimes you have to have had the experience to even value the thing, to talk about the thing, to bring it into the mix. So Yeah, but let me turn that around, right? What's your experience as a woman? What's your experience of, have you felt afraid to speak up, or what has had you most want to speak up? Kiara says, my teacher asked me to not sing at school because I was making everyone go out of tune. And at 46, I started to play the piano, and I now have been practicing for 2 years. So liberating. Yay to you. I love that. Keep it up. Keep it up. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to either having done that or wanting to do that. Just scrolling down here. Sal says, I love how you can think of different ways and different perspectives of expressing a point or topic, just as you are now. Yay. Thanks. Thank you also for being here. I know that some of you have been here from the beginning. I know I sometimes have a tendency to go at length. So I appreciate it. Jack, you have great empathy. Thank you. Doing my best. And trying to stay a student. Lots more to learn is how it feels to me. Sal, I have a question. What are your ideas and thoughts about how to deflate either my own or another's defensiveness? Yeah, that's a good topic. Let me just have a sip here. So it can be easier to be with other people's defensiveness when their defense style is similar than your own, because it's sort of like, oh, I get this, right? So if, so let's just maybe take this personally. So one of my defense styles could be to withdraw, right? And get kind of quiet and kind of retreat. And so if you have that, you might be less triggered by it because you can sort of observe in yourself like, oh, okay, yeah, I do that. So maybe one, you have more understanding, compassion. Two, you may also know what you need. And it's possible we need different things, but you may know that when you're withdrawn, what you benefit from is actually just a little bit of silence and something that's kind of soft and gentle that maybe coaxes you out, right? And if you are withdrawn, the more that someone is direct or strong or confrontational, actually the more it has you withdraw. But if you actually just take the focus off, or someone just puts an arm around you, or just says, I don't know, hey, do you want to go British on you? Hey, do you want a cup of tea? That's what works, right? So that's one thing about defensiveness. The hardest tends to be when we have different defense styles. So the classic difference is between the disarming defense style and the kind of direct defense style. So disarming meaning I tend to want to prioritize the harmony. So I tend to kind of minimize on the problem, and I tend to want to kind of disarm. So I either disarm you or me. So maybe I downplay the anger, the conflict, and I sort of upplay the harmony, like the things that still connect us, versus the direct, or what they sometimes call the more masculine style of defense, which is like, hey, there's a problem and I'm going to tell you about it, right? So I actually get stronger and I get more confrontational, and I tend to upplay the truth, right? And we could say, what is the truth? And we could get into a whole conversation about that. But let's just say what I experience as true in the foreground of my experience in this moment. I tend to focus on that, and I tend to downplay the harmony, right? So I'm actually gonna, the full extreme of this is, I don't care how this impacts you. I don't care how you feel. This is the truth. You're gonna hear it. Now, some people love that. Why? Because it makes them feel safe, because they also have that as a sort of modus operandi, right? So some people are like, yeah, you bring out your sledgehammer, I'll bring out mine, let's get at it, and we're going to get more truth, and I value truth more than harmony, so I feel safe. Now, if you value harmony more than truth, and most of us tend to, particularly under stress, go one way more than the other, right? Part of our integrated development is learning how to value those things, or particularly the side of that equation we value less. But most of us are still going to go down one side or the other. So if you value harmony more and someone starts getting more truthful and more direct, that's probably going to be hard for you. And then it's going to be hard for them, right? So I've been in this where you're sort of now in like and I've been on both sides of this, by the way, so it doesn't just go one way, but this sort of escalating thing. Like the more I'm being truthful with you and the less that you're meeting me in that truth or hearing it, actually, for me now triggers me to be even more truthful, right? To the point where I've embarrassed myself in lots of arguments where I've become, age regressed, mean, aggressive, even to the point where I might be like, okay, you see this? is this a book? Can we just agree? Is this a book? And if you can't say, I'll agree that's a book, I'm like, okay, well, I can't even talk to you right now because you don't have any reverence for what's true. You're so, whatever the judgment would be there, you're so lost in your own, experience or feelings or, desire to, not talk about what's actually happening. So this is difficult territory. On the self side, right, just noticing afterwards, what came up for me there, right? Anytime we get super like forceful or triggered or one-dimensional or activated, there's probably something in it for us. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a real thing that needed to be named, and it's not making all triggers wrong. It's just sort of saying, I came on really strong there, or that was a really or I got super withdrawn, like to the point, I've sometimes either felt withdrawn or it's almost like my gears have got stuck up, right? Like we were spinning on the bike and now I'm like, and I'm just kind of, I don't know if you remember that scene in Terminator 2, maybe I'm aging myself here, but where the bad guy, right, he's driving the truck full of liquid nitrogen and then it explodes. And so he's a kind of this metallic Terminator and then he gets frozen, right? I can have that experience where, you can tell I can normally kind of talk and converse and I get completely stuck and I don't even know what to do or what to say. It's kind of embarrassing. It's hard. I kind of just don't even want the other person to be there at that point, So then for me to get a little curious, like, what was actually going on there? So the more we do some inquiry into our own defensiveness, obviously that's a good thing. And if it's a strong reaction, I just would say be open to the possibility that there's more involved, and that more involved could involve your past, right? It could involve, an early love relationship and or relationship with, mom, dad, or, guardian, close sibling. Just sort of notice, where have I been like this before? Where has this thing activated me before, right? So if the complaint is you never save money, right? Or the complaint is you are always late, or you only care about yourself, or you never see me, then where has that been a thing before? Where have I not felt seen before? Where has someone else's punctuality been an issue? Or where has not saving money been an issue? Or where was I criticized for not saving money? So that's the opportunity. It's hard to do it in the moment. In the moment, often the best thing is just to notice, I'm triggered or we're escalated. Ideally, you might just break off at that point and just say, look, I'm flooded and I need to take some time. What can be difficult is some of these engages, if both of our defensiveness is engaged enough, I might not want you to leave, right? So that can be a difficult thing that now we've got to deal with the impact of me saying, hey, I'm going to take myself off. Some people like that. They're like, yeah, cool, let's take some cool off time. Sometimes, and I've been experiences like this, is like that also creates its own set of issues. So that's difficult. But if you have an opportunity to talk when you're connected, you might also invite the conversation about, well, what do you think my defense style is? Or what do you notice about me when I'm defensive? And perhaps, vice versa. What do I notice about you if there's a curiosity there? It's almost like the more we can build that picture, right? If you know that when I'm under stress, I'm likely to get super withdrawn, you might be able to take it less personally. You might even have compassion for me. Now, you might not have compassion for me in your moment of activation, but when your system is more, regulated, you might notice like, wow, that, being an aged regressed little Jack probably isn't Jack's favorite experience, So maybe I can have a little bit of compassion. Like, wow, here's Jack, and the best he can do is be like a kind of 5-year-old right now who's kind of, having a little bit of an internal temper tantrum. Wow, maybe that's what he had to do, right? That's one of his learned strategies, or that was the best he could do. It's the best he can still do, and that's kind of humbling, right? When you're, a lot of the time in your more full adulthood. So yeah, that's what I'm got. I'm curious if anyone else wants to chime in, or if that's, if that's helpful to you. I would also say this, having a right to your own defensiveness, right? So I'm not going to try and solidify my defensiveness. I'm not going to try and get righteous about it, but just sort of realizing defensiveness is part of life. Most of us will have it at some points. The more we are close to someone, or the more we depend upon someone, or we share resources, time, energy, money, space, bodily connection, the more likely it is that this kind of thing is going to come up. And so just having a little bit of sobriety. Like, you're probably not going to have a deep friendship with someone where you don't occasionally run into their defensiveness and vice versa. And so maybe that's okay. Maybe we can have a little bit of like sobriety and compassion. That's going to be part of the mix. And probably people would prefer to have an option on the menu called I'm not being defensive, right? So as much as we might be righteous in our defensiveness so that it defends us, so it does a good job. If I have the option called lug around 50 pounds of armor every day or just walk in a t-shirt and shorts, I would take the t-shirt and shorts. I just might not know how to do that yet. Do you sort of get it? So it's just also being kind of easeful and graceful towards ourselves and other people. Thank you for the question. If you are joining us, we are here. We are taking a few questions. I'm probably going to be going for another 10 minutes or so. If you have a question, feel free to put question or Q in front of it so I can pick it out quickly. I might just pick up the pace here to catch up on comments. And thank you also for those of you who have pre-submitted questions. I'm going to take one here. I met a guy online, not yet in person. He knows my days off, and I also told him I need to meet in person sooner than later. He has not offered a time to meet, so I don't think we're a match. Should I tell him I'm not interested or just not respond to his last vague hi? I don't like ghosting, but maybe it's kinder than saying I'm not interested. If I tell him why I'm not interested, is that just unnecessary? Yeah, so I get this situation. I've been in situations like this. I'm sure many of you have, where you're sort of like, is it even worth saying something? And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all kind of right and wrong, right? You might just get an authentic impulse and respond to it, right? Your authentic impulse might be, we don't owe each other anything. He hasn't made an effort, so I don't need to say anything. So it's actually fine to just let it go. Or I actually am practicing making authentic communication, so I'm going to make it, not actually for him in this instance, but really for me, because I want to practice naming my experience. So I'm just going to say, hey, I noticed there's not a lot of interest, it seems, in meeting up. Brackets, let me know if I'm getting that right or not. And so, unless I hear back from you within X time frame, 24 hours, 48 hours, Monday morning, whatever it is, I'm likely to move on. And I wish you well, right? So particularly if you can find the I wish you well place. So that's not just, false kindness. It's not like, actually, I feel really angry and frustrated, but I'm going to try and put a smile on it. At the end of the day, I want to say, this is a bit of a British phrase, and it's sort of like, it's much of a muchness, right? Sort of meaning either way is fine. The best thing is that you are just kind of moving forward, whether it's like, I released the match, or sometimes you don't even have to unmatch. You might just say, I'll just leave it there, and then I'll just see, leave it there for a day, a week, see if anything else comes back. But I'm not really going to tie up my energy with it. That's sort of the skill, is the redeploying of that energy elsewhere. There's also a place that you can communicate from, which it doesn't need them to reply or not, right? It's sort of like you own, I'm saying this and I'm not expecting them to reply, but I'm going to have a standard of care that is what I appreciate. So I'm going to just take a stand for it. My standard of care is I actually name to people what's true for me. And I can do it lovingly, and I can do it, sensitively, but that's sort of how I want to roll. And that's what I would appreciate from a guy, of saying, hey, actually, I don't feel drawn to meet in person, but I have enjoyed chatting with you. Or, I'm maxed at work, and honestly, there's no likelihood we're going to meet up in the next quarter. So, have a nice life. If you prefer that, then you just take a kind of a stand for it. And I would also say, practice the thing that is hard for you. If the easier thing for you would just be to like hit unmatch, then maybe practice making the communication. If you tend to over-explain yourself, maybe just practice, unmatching, or letting it lie for a week, and if nothing else comes back, unmatching. So sort of do the thing that's in your direction of development. I've got another question here, and just before I read it out, I'm going to flick back over to our comments section and just see if I've got any more questions that have come through. Thank you for all of these comments. I see there's a pretty rich conversation. Sal says, I do find areas easy for me to speak up in, and then there are different areas I struggle in, asking for what I need. I struggle with bringing ideas to my CEO for support. Yeah. So let's turn that around, for instance, right? Does your CEO have an open door policy? Does your CEO make it easy for people to bring ideas? Is your CEO reinforcing like, hey, bring me your ideas or I want to hear from you? Not saying that they need to or they should to, but just noticing, are you in an environment that's supporting you to do that? Or in a sense, are you having to act somewhat counterculturally in order to do that? Maybe in the fullness of time, this is feedback for your CEO, right? Or you might find that in another period of your life, maybe you're in a different organization with a different CEO and different culture, because actually you value being in a place that is sort of feedback positive. So curious what kind of systems you're in. Porvi says, I like your outdoors videos in nature. Thank you. Yeah, I love shooting videos in nature. Often the reality is I'm like, hey, I'm going to go for a hike. And then I start and I'm like, oh, damn, I'm getting inspired here. And then I have something that kind of comes through a little bit that I want to share. So I don't always plan to do like a day's filming. I do, typically obviously take my phone, but I often don't have my tripod with me, which is why you'll sometimes see me just filming, freehand, which isn't always the best thing to do, but it's not because I lack planning for the day. It's just that the day takes a slightly different turn of events. So let's see what we've got. I'm just going to post this link here again. If you're joining us, I'm going to be moving into presenting a new offering to this community. It is going to be related to some of the themes that we've been discussing here today: self-love and boundaries, authenticity, healing. And we're going to be doing some practices and experiments that I have not done before. So if you're interested in being part of a group experience, a group coaching experience, I would love for you to consider whether this might be something for you. There's going to be more information released in the coming days. For the moment, I'm just inviting you to make sure you are on my mailing list so you hear about it and you get the opportunity to get in the early bird enrollment. Porvi, hi from Purabi in India. Where is that in India? I have been to India a few times, but I don't think I know where that is. Sal has a question. What are your ideas and thoughts? Oh, sorry, I did answer that one. Lisa has a question. What are good ways to deal with abandonment? My family abandoned me in my hour of need. Yeah, well, firstly, I'm sorry. Like, let's just name that. That sounds doubly hard, right? To be in your hour of need, which I'm sure was difficult anyway, and then to feel abandoned in your hour of need. That's a double whammy. That sounds hard. So I'm sorry that you had that experience. And I'm sure you've had to have, strength and resilience to come through that. And I hope that the necessary healing around that is available for you. Abandonment. So I think the first thing I want to say about that is, if someone were in a good place in themselves, they wouldn't want to abandon a member of their family. Meaning in sort of full consciousness, I'm not sure that it's that available to us to abandon someone, right? So I sort of mean in full awareness, mental health, etc., resourced. Typically, we're going to want to help a family member, right? Even if we have our differences or, histories or whatever. So, I don't know the specifics of this, but there may be a place that you can eventually include, some sort of compassion and understanding that if they were in a better place, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Prior to that, it may be that for you, it's actually about processing what has happened and how you really feel about it and giving yourself the floor, giving yourself the ability to connect with your authentic feelings about this experience. I'm imagining there might be experiences of hurt. Maybe there's rage. Maybe there's resignation. Maybe there's anger. Maybe there's anger from feeling, powerless or just, feeling overlooked, unseen, unsupported, right? So have you had that opportunity? And I don't suggest you do that initially with your family. I suggest you do that in a space with a coach, therapist, friend, and or yourself. You might do some, there's actually something that we're probably going to include in this program is, doing some somatic writing, right? So we get to really write out from that place of feeling connected to what our more difficult emotional experiences are. Let's imagine for a moment that you're on the other side of that, and that's been somewhat successful. So you've been able to get some of that out of your system. And then maybe you're in the question of, well, how do I want to connect with the family, right? And it might be that now you're in the position where you're talking a little bit more about a scar than a wound. And it's not always binary. There's a sort of continuum there, but sort of meaning I'm not still like spilling a whole bunch of blood, and actually we need to like bandage this up. Like there's an immediate thing that needs to just be put on hold, but more like, yeah, it's healed enough. I can still see there's a scar there, and maybe if I really poke it, it's kind of a bit painful, but mostly it's kind of good. And so I'm now maybe going back to them with a set of shares and requests possibly. So the share might be about the experience that I've had, and the request might be something to do with how we are together going forward, or support that I would like to experience. And ideally a request is something that they can say yes or no to. So it's not necessarily a demand, but sometimes there is a place where it's like, well, if none of these requests is amenable, then I'm not sure we even have a relationship that, can make sense for me. Ideally we want to get to some kind of forgiveness, even if it's for ourselves, right? Because it's not easy to walk around with a ongoing sense of hurt and anger towards someone or a system, but that can just be really difficult territory, because you may never have shared reality about it, right? What you do have is the authenticity of your experience. So as much as possible, we try and speak from subjective experience, speak from inarguable experience. What you have felt is what you have felt. And there's a way that you can distinguish by, keeping yourself on your side of the fence, keeping yourself in I statements, etc. The challenge sometimes is even if you do that well, right? So if you're in a group of people who get the difference between talking from subjective experience and sort of putting something on someone else, and let's say you're being very clean, right? So you're saying, well, I felt this when this happened, or I was hoping for this and that didn't happen. Whether someone else hears it in that way depends on, where they're at and their level of development and other things. So just a little caveat there. Sometimes what you say and what people hear are obviously going to be two different things. But the more you practice being in the I statement, you might even have space for someone else not fully hearing you, but you've got a kind of a discernment point there of, am I in a space where I can still not be heard and be okay with that? Or is the risk that this actually, opens the wound back up or kind of re-traumatizes me more? You may not have perfect kind of precognition about that, but you might just have an intuition that, yeah, I'm actually in a place where, mum may continue to not get how difficult and abandoned I felt, but that's actually okay, because this is about me expressing and owning who I am, and mum can take it or leave it. I would love it if she would take it somewhat, but actually that's okay. Or if just the notion that, God, I'm going to be unheard again is now going to go right back into this, I'm unheard and I'm abandoned and no one gets it, you might want to keep working it with other supportive spaces until you can get closer to that point. The other thing that it just strikes me that could be in here is subjectification, right? So this can be easy to do with our families, is to sort of imagine that they should support me in the way that I would support them. And if that's not explicitly agreed upon, it's possibly not going to occur that way, right? So sort of meaning, I may care for my family by researching health topics when they have a health problem, right? That's how I'm showing my care. Now, I would like them to do that for me when I have a health problem, but maybe that's not what is going to happen. But the way that they show their care for me is they always make sure that, they stay up late at night worrying if I've got a problem. Even if they're communicating with me or not, they're going to worry about it, right? Or actually, if I've got a problem, they're going to talk about it to another family member and that's their way of showing concern, is they're actually, using time with someone else to talk about it, right? So sometimes this can just be an opportunity to sort of open up our scripts a little bit and notice, I didn't get the thing that I wanted, but I wasn't really able to ask for it, or maybe I did and they still didn't give it to me. But if that's authentic, that might just be authentic, right? Like, meaning we don't always get what we want. And in our adulthood, one of the advantages we have is that we don't necessarily have to face abandonment in quite the same way. Abandonment as a child is typically life-threatening, right? Because a child, this humans have a huge period of dependency. A 5-year-old is not going to just be running around outside fending for itself and doing well. In adulthood, we still may have a lot of needs, and we may still turn to our family for those needs, but oftentimes we could meet them elsewhere, or there are certain ways that our own, self-reliance or intimate relationship or friendship group or work colleagues or local community or global community, there are other ways that we can get some of those needs met. So we might just also start to kind of sober there about, what actually, given who my family is, who I am, and how the connection is, and where we have shared reality, what is possible for the family to support and what is not. And I might have to grieve that. Gosh, I always thought that you would, come to the opera with me, but actually you're just never really going to do it. And that's sort of authentic for you, even though it's, incredibly disappointing for me. Now, that might sound like a trivial example. You might be talking about, in my hour of need, I was down on my knees and, life-threatening, and, and where was my family, and that, God, what a difficult experience. It just might be that, you learn how to go to some other places first for support, or when it comes to your family, you make it incredibly simple and direct when you're asking for support. So there's no ambiguity about what I'm asking, right? Now, they might be a yes, no, maybe counter offer. Maybe they say yes and they actually don't show up. There could be all sorts of things there. But, we sort of remove it from the realm of like, gosh, I just assumed that you should show up like this because that's kind of what I would do or I would expect. And we get it a little bit more into the, simplicity of directness. If you have an abandonment wound already from childhood, then this is going to be a place that you're likely to already be super sensitive. So we also try and include that, right? Like, if you've had shoulder surgery, your shoulder's still going to be sensitive. So it's easier for you to experience shoulder pain than someone else. So you might be more sensitive to abandonment. You might sense that it's coming. You might already start to act in ways that support your abandonment, right? Because part of you is like, well, I'm anticipating this, so now I don't ask as concretely for what I want. Or perhaps I already I say, well, it doesn't really matter if you pick me up or not from the airport, so to speak, and then they don't, and then I kind of contributed a bit because I kind of underplayed how much it meant to me. So you can start to get curious about some of that stuff. And it's also difficult territory. There may be a place that you can directly engage in healing with a family member. That might be an invitation that you can make at some point. Maybe they're completely unreceptive, but at least you've owned your authenticity. My authenticity is that, sister, I would love to be in therapy with you. I might be willing to pay for it. I might be willing to go half-half. I might be willing to pay for the first session. And if you find value, let's continue in it. I might be willing to go into therapy without an assumption that there's anything that you need to do, but just because I sense that there's some healing that I want and that you could be part of that. Would you be willing to do it for me? Now you may be talking about someone who's the least likely person to ever go into therapy. So going into therapy with another person, no, not really available for that. But do you see what I mean? So we don't try and get overly expectant that other people need to do the things, but we start to just kind of clean up on our side of the fence, right? Name what I want, ask for it, notice when I feel supported, let people know if I don't. If there's no curiosity about that, maybe that's not the place I go for support. But I notice over here, I don't know, sometimes it's not your immediate family. Maybe it's like, I don't know, a second cousin. They get it and they show up, or your next door neighbor. They get it and they show up. And you sort of relax some of the ideas of, family of origin, and maybe family becomes a bit more of a broad concept to you. It's hard sometimes trying to get a specific thing from a specific person who, if this is mom and dad, probabilistically they're in the latter stages of their life, right? So they've probably had, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years where they've been a certain way. And now to change that may not be straightforward. It may not be impossible, but there's just maybe a little sobriety about that as well. So yeah, there's a lot that could be in there, and I'm just approaching different on-ramps in some ways, but I hope that that might give you some starting points. All right, I got a bit behind here. Jeez. I need to be a bit more succinct. Well, thanks for listening in. If you're joining us, I'm going to be wrapping here shortly. I have not been able to get to every question. I'm trying to see if there's any questions for anyone that I haven't answered a question from. I do have a pre-submit here. How does keeping your options open work in a good, healthy way so that it gives opportunities for a real connection or chance to blossom without getting too emotionally involved too soon or attaching to someone before it's even clear that it is relationship potential? To find out if it has potential, I feel I have to attach. And when I get physical, I get feelings for someone and attach too soon. How can I get to know someone without attaching too much too soon? So that's a very nuanced question, and I appreciate the way that you have articulated that. And just for a little bit of context for people, the sort of previous piece of context here was about dating coaches giving a lot of advice about dating multiply, right? So that you don't get too prematurely into one connection. I'll say I get why that advice is being given, and I also get that it may not always work well for people, so dating multiply is one way of trying to solve for getting too prematurely attached, right? Or for what I call building castles in the sky, so sort of imagining the relationship or connections a bit further along than it is. Now, some people are going to find that more easy or hard. If we just think about it simplistically, if you're more prone to be anxiously attached, you're probably going to find that a bit harder, right? Than someone who's maybe more prone to being avoidant in their attachment might just find that a little bit easy, right? Now, and you might consider this, that, as a dating coach, I might be somewhere along that spectrum, right? As a dating coach, I might be more avoidant myself, and so I might give advice that's more rooted in an avoidant way of being. And I'm not making that wrong. That might be just powerful advice, but it might also be slightly circumscribed to a subset of the population, or it might have a kind of an unconscious bias that I'm not acknowledging. In some ways, there may not be an easy answer to your question, right? Do you have to get physical in order to know what kind of connection there is, right? And people vary on their answer to this. Some people are a clear yes, right? Until we've made out, I'm not really going to know what the physical connection's like. Some people can know, like, I'm attracted to you, and yes, I don't quite know what it's like for us to be fully physical, but I kind of know that the physical attraction's there, right? Versus, and we often get this, that someone's like, I like this guy, but I'm just not attracted to him, right? Which is, I think, quite distinct from I'm attracted to you and maybe I don't quite know what it's like to be fully physical with you, but I kind of know the attraction is already there. Maybe for you, there is a practice of being willing to, have a kiss at the end of a date and actually not make too much of it, just kind of enjoy it as an in-the-moment experience. Now, if you're saying, I literally cannot do that, then you might have to, delay being physical, right? And it might just be this is going to be a little area of tension for you, because on the one hand, I kind of need to kiss the guy to know if there's a physical connection. On the other hand, as soon as I kiss him, now there's kind of like feelings involved. That might not be something that we can easily resolve. That might just be a sort of a tension to be managed, right? And you might go slightly one way or the other. You might notice, I feel pretty clear there is a physicality here, so I don't actually need to explore that. I can just trust that that's there. Or, I'm going to risk kissing this guy, but I know I might get a little bit of my heart involved, but I'm actually going to keep a lot of sobriety in the background. Like, I'm catching feelings. I don't necessarily really know who this person in front of me is. And there's even language that you can use, right? Where you can sort of say, I notice there's love here right now, right? Or I notice I feel very full in my heart, or I notice that, I'm getting butterflies in my stomach, even if this is just language to yourself, right? Rather than like, I'm falling for the guy, or like, he's the right guy, or I want to be in a relationship with him, right? We stop there, but we just get very kind of almost scientific and discreet about our own experience. could it be that for you it's better to have a sort of discrete dating strategy where you just say, yeah, once it gets to a certain level of connection, right, which is maybe, I don't know, we've gone on a second date or some metric that you have, like I actually just going to put my attention on this person until it gets to its logical conclusion. It doesn't have to be logical, till it gets to a conclusion. And I know people who date that way, and I've known in my own dating where people say something like that. They'll say like, I'm interested in the connection with you, and I'm actually just going to take other dating off the table. Doesn't mean it needs to go somewhere, but it just feels kind of right to me. I don't need to be out exploring more until we know what this is. You might wait until the guy makes that kind of communication, So I guess I'm saying you don't have to have a universal dating strategy that's either I date multiply or I date one until we see where it goes. You can also remain responsive to the situation in front of you. The guy in front of you might be, if you're a woman that dates men, he might be of enough interest that you're willing to just say, yeah, whether I declare it or not to him, this is where I'm going to put my attention until I know what's there. You might also notice, like, I'm kind of interested in this guy, but it still feels authentically good for me to be going on other dates with other men. And that's what it is, So I guess I'm giving you permission to have a sort of breadth in your protocol as to how you approach dating. Part of this is also, and maybe this doesn't always get talked about, it's sort of like the slight difference between, broadly speaking, male and female dating strategy, right? That men generally have, even if it's a fantasy, but they have more interest on the whole in kind of a variety in their dating and relating, right? So in a sense, sometimes the guy often, and it can be completely the reverse. And I know women who are like, no, I love dating multiple people, or I'm completely ethically non-monogamous. That's just who I am. But on the whole, you might find the guy is actually, he's trying to keep his options open, and you're trying to kind of like narrow down on one option, right? And then dating and relating and is kind of all where that meets and how that gets figured out. And sometimes it aligns because the guy is inspired enough to want to only date you and pursue you, and you want that, and then we see where it goes. And sometimes it doesn't quite align, that you actually would like to lock it down into something, even if it's, there's no real commitment, but just this is an exclusive inquiry. What is this? And, he's not actually available for that. So I don't know if I have a kind of a silver bullet, if I ever have a silver, I don't even know if it's a silver bullet. If I ever have a protocol, it's kind of just awareness, right? A more and more awareness. I might even name, I notice I feel drawn to get to know you more than anyone else right now. But I also know I have a tendency to get prematurely attached, and I'm practicing not doing that. So I'm going to continue to be open to other dating. But if you ever want to take this into a more exclusive form of inquiry or dating, I am open to that. So that might be a way that you deal with it, is by you just presence and be authentic about what your experience is. And, he may meet you there, he may get it, he may not. But at least then you're keeping him current with what your experience is. You don't have to do it perfect. Sometimes you might notice, wow, I've gotten a little attached and I'm going to backtrack a bit. And the way I'm going to backtrack is I'm going to cool the communication down. I'm going to take longer to respond. And when we talk about going on the next date, I'm going to push it out slightly. And I'm perhaps going to up my communication with someone else I've been in touch with. Now, for some of you, that might feel manipulative, or it might not feel authentic, But actually, if premature attachment is a kind of inauthenticity, then if we're practicing something else, you might have to do things that also don't feel completely aligned, but help you solve for the main problem, right? So often in life, to solve the main problem, we do a thing that then introduces a new problem, right? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's hard to not have something somewhere that gets a little altered or impacted. So maybe sometimes it's sort of the lesser of two evils. Or you could say, I'm going to still be in touch with other men, but I'm not going to be physical with them, but I reserve the right to go on a date with them. So that might be a way through it. Or you might say to the guy, I don't want to get prematurely attached, and that happens when I get physical. So for the next couple of weeks, I don't actually want to be physical, or however many weeks would be right for you, but I am going to not be in contact with other men. So this has my attention. This is what I'm interested in, but I don't want to get prematurely attached, so I'm going to delay the physicality. But I actually want to be kind of exclusive my orientation to you. Now, obviously, you might prefer it if the guy were possibly leading that conversation, saying, "Hey, I'm really interested in you, and I'd love it if we were doing something exclusive," or, I want to be physical with you, but I respect where you're at, and maybe we can just kind of keep that out there as a conversation for when we both feel ready. So, it might not be that it's always on you to want to lead that conversation and kind of articulate what it is and what it isn't. Some of that can also just be in the background. If the guy is not forwarding the conversation about exclusivity, I don't think you owe him your exclusivity. And it might actually be that for you, it's best to keep some stuff in the background, but just maybe keep being mindful about your physicality. But I think you can also adjust that through practice, right? So you might be able to create a space where you say, yeah, I know that if I go beyond this kind of physicality, right? If I open up sexually more in this way, then I've got a kind of an issue, meaning I'm going to be much more energetically connected. But actually, if really what we're talking about is, some cuddling or some making out, I can actually do that, and I can kind of go home and I can kind of metabolize the feelings I have, and I'm actually fine. So you may just, kind of have your calibration, and that calibration may also relate to how intense the physical connection is, right? If you have a very intense physical connection with someone, you may notice, wow, I actually really need to put the brakes on that, because that's just opening it up way too quickly. Someone else, it might be like, yeah, we have a good physical connection, but it's not going to kind of like overwhelm my nervous system. And so it's kind of easier for me to engage. Those are my thoughts. I appreciate the question. And let's see, I have one more question here. If I'm attracting unavailable men or breadcrumbers, how do I heal that inner child? What's all the stuff I need to look into myself? Yeah. So I think step number one is trying to say no to keeping that in your life, right? So that might be easier said than done. But if you notice that you're in an experience of like, I'm really only getting breadcrumbs, get curious what you're giving and whether you're basically giving more than you're receiving. And maybe we could have you practice not that, right? So, one solution to breadcrumbs in a sense is giving breadcrumbs, right? Not from vengeance, but just from reciprocity, right? Well, if he's not really texting me back, why do I keep texting him? If he's only kind of available for a very occasional date, then maybe I'm only occasionally available for a date. So we solve it a little bit structurally by basically just, we call this matching the guy's energy, right? It's more difficult if the guy was much more into it and then has kind of come down into breadcrumbs. If it's breadcrumbs from the beginning, it's a little easier to spot. So sometimes the recalibration maneuver is more difficult. Sometimes it can work just to presence what's happening, right? And just to say, hey, I noticed we were kind of more connected. I hear from you less. That's okay. I just want to check, am I getting that right? Because I'm going to start putting my attention elsewhere. So sometimes just declaring what is true from you is part of the kind of remediation of this, or the sort of like the healing of this. I don't think the point is to try and like heal your inner child to the extent that breadcrumbing would never impact you. It's more that you don't say yes to breadcrumbing. You don't say yes to things that are actually. You don't say yes to things that rely upon you having to fill in for the other person. You don't say yes to things that rely on you creating a fantasy about why they aren't in touch with you, or you have to kind of make a compensation story, like he's so busy. He could be way busy, right? He has a right to text you or not, but you have a right to say, does that really work for me? Now, if you're saying I had an early childhood experience of a lack of availability of men, so let's say, dad possibly in this instance, that's a really important and potent kind of question for healing. There's a lot potentially in that. One thing you can just notice is, does this feel familiar? Does it feel familiar that I'm basically trying to get the attention of the masculine, and it's not really forthcoming, and I almost don't really know what to do in order to get that attention. And I remember what that was like, because I was always trying to get dad's attention, and dad was always like busy, or was always working. I was always pushing it off. I have heard kind of poignant things from people where the healing in this territory is actually about desubjectification, right? So that's a long word. I just kind of made that up. Or the D part. So the desubjectification, meaning I'm actually going to notice if it was true that dad was unavailable, sort of period, right? Which could absolutely be true, right? Maybe dad left, right? Or maybe dad, only saw me on Christmas Day and then it was completely awkward and he didn't even get me a present, right? So we could be all sorts of, objectively, hugely verifiable unavailability. Sometimes it could be, dad was available to like support the family and he was working hard at it, but he wasn't really that emotionally available. And that might be because dad doesn't really have that capacity or he doesn't value it. Dad might not be that emotionally available to himself, let alone his little girl, right? So that's not, sort of making that okay. Ideally, that wouldn't be the case, but it is a sort of sobriety about, okay, well, it's hard for someone to do something that they don't have the capacity to do. So maybe there's a little bit of compassion there for dad. Dad did the best and his best kind of sucked. Or dad did his best and his best really deeply impacted me and made me very suspicious of men. Or, dad did his best and he didn't care about how I felt. And that's hard. And now I really fear men because men don't really care what you feel. And so how can you feel connected to them? Now, all of that could be true. And it could be true in generalization that on the whole, men are going to care less about certain feelings, but you might learn to notice what men do care about and ways that they do support and love, but they just look different, right? And it might be that, they show up by consistency or they show up by providing or they show up by trying to solve your problems, but they don't really show up by being connected to how you feel. It's actually quite hard to do, even as a guy that's probably more on the emotional side than a lot of men. Sometimes it's just really hard to do that, or really hard to do that with the same capacity that a lot of women can do that for women, and I'm not trying to get men off the hook. I'm just like, you can kind of do what you do as you're developing your capacity. So, why am I saying this? So there might be a way that you are pausing for availability that is hyper-focused on specific parts of it, which could be true and authentic to you, right? It could be like, yeah, if you want to be in my world, I'm going to need you to be kind of available in this way. Like if I'm deeply upset, I'm going to kind of need you to come hold my hand and put an arm around me and show that you care how I feel. And you might not even know how to attract a guy like that because you have no experience of that kind of guy. And maybe just probabilistically and statistically, that's a much smaller subset of men. But you might be able to get to the stage where you're willing to train the right guy who's kind of interested enough that he wants to learn how to do that. Or you might be able to learn, wow, he's never going to quite do that thing that I would do and I can do so well for my girlfriends. But he can do this other thing, which is, when we've got a problem and I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe getting much more negative emotionality about it, right? Which on the whole, women are going to have more negative emotionality than men. He's actually kind of rolls and he kind of deals with it and somehow he doesn't get quite as upset about it. And that's actually a bonus, And so I can sort of see that, like he's sort of available to kind of like still make something happen when maybe for me, I'm melting down a little bit and I'm not making the meltdown wrong. I'm just saying different sort of capacities and sometimes they can work better together or not. So we can, I think, never not attract unavailable men. The question kind of becomes what happens the moment we notice, let's say historically I had sensitivity to gluten. Now I can do some things to avoid that, right? I can get strict in my diet and I can have less gluten in the house or no gluten and all. But I might also find that if I'm, I've had this, you go to the restaurant, they give you the gluten-free menu and they serve you something and I'm tasting this and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is gluten. Like I can, and maybe that's a level of sensitivity I have that some people don't, but I'm like, I can tell because I can start to feel it impacting in my body. So you might have a thing like that with unavailable men where you're like, this is starting to taste like an unavailable man. Maybe I didn't notice it. Maybe he was super responsive on our initial text or the first date, but yeah, he's kind of, maybe he's a bit checked out or maybe he just can't feel. Right? I mean, a lot of us guys are just so up here. We're not going to feel anyway. And it's actually not about you. It's about us. It's like, it's not like I go home and feel everything in my heart and myself and my yummy emotions, but with you, I'm just super stoic. It's like, I ain't feeling, honey. And that's a hard place to live from, right? Or I'm disconnected from that. That's, even if it's true authentically that a lot of men are going to be less emotional, to not feel ever, that's a problem, and that you're missing a big part of life. So all of that to say, it's like you might never be able to put yourself in a situation where you aren't unsafe. You might just notice very quickly and more early, oh, I don't feel safe. What do I need to do? I'm not going to walk down that street. I don't feel safe. I'm just going to stop here and make a call to a friend. I don't feel safe. I'm going to go stand under that light. I don't feel safe. I'm actually going to get an Uber right now, then continue to walk home. Do you know what I mean? It's like you have ways of dealing with the thing. So that guy doesn't feel super available. So I'm going to just stop reaching out to him for a moment, and I'm going to go check in with my friend, and I'm going to have is this an unavailable guy conversation? Get a reality check, right? For any of us that are more prone to anxious attachment, prematurely attaching, you might want to have a friend in your life who's in your corner, and you just say, look, when I start getting to know a guy, can I just text and call you if I kind of notice that I'm kind of getting a bit anxious and a bit attached? Like, could you just give me a bit of a reality check? You might have to talk me down a little bit. Do you kind of see what I mean? So I'm a bit more interested in that. That to me seems like the sort of the sober thing. What I don't want is a fear of unavailable men. Men don't need to be feared in that way. You, I think, can take more empowerment over your own decisions. And sometimes you still may fall off the horse. Do you know what I mean? Meaning, I will still surprise myself where I'm like, damn, I just got my empath completely blown out by someone. Why did I even do that? Why did I even spend the time, listening to the latest, political rant about XYZ that I kind of care about, but I don't need the rant, and why am I wasting my energy? And I know about this stuff, and I deal with it, and I work with it, and damn, I still got flawed, So sometimes that might even happen where you're like, gee, I just dated another unavailable guy. But here's the thing. I noticed it quicker, right? This time it didn't take 4 years, it took 4 months. Or this time it didn't take 4 months, it took 4 weeks. Or it didn't take 4 weeks, it took 4 days. Or it didn't take 4 days, it took 3 days. As long as we're practicing and that trajectory is hopefully coming in our favor, that's great. Keep at it. And you might also find that it's quicker for you to recover. So rather than you feeling quite so devastated and down on yourself that, I only attract unavailable men, or men are always so unavailable, it might be like, no, I'm going to keep this discreet. I had a few signs. I didn't quite listen to them. He has a right to his unavailability. I have a right to my no. I'm actually going to move on. I'm not going to globalize and generalize that all men are unavailable. I'm not going to be down on myself. I'm not going to take on a self-identity that I only attract unavailable men. I'm just going to say that's what's happening, and this is what I continue to practice. And as best I can, I move on. And if I can't, I get support. So I'm willing to go spend and have a session with someone, a friend, therapist, coach, to help me just try and metabolize this a little bit more. Do you see what I mean? So you kind of take more ownership in that direction rather than creating sort of like concretized realities about all men or all me. I think that's often the easier way of proceeding. Alrighty, y'all. I am going to have to love you and leave you, as we say. I know I didn't get to everyone's questions here. If you have a question that is still unanswered and you want me to answer it, perhaps you can just take a copy of it and post it under this video when it goes kind of into the archives, just because the chat thread takes, it only comes in real time, so it takes a long time to go back and find those questions. I will do my best to try and answer it. We still have this link here. If you want to opt in to be on my mailing list, I would love to have you on the mailing list. Thank you to all of you who pre-submitted questions. I got to most of them, not all. So if you still want a question answered that I didn't get to, again, you're welcome to post it beneath this video. Thanks for the liveliness of all your chats. I appreciate it. Thanks to those of you who have been staying up late, because I know it's now late in Europe and in Africa. So thanks for being here. And as I say, if you're interested in doing deeper work with me, we are going to have a new program launching soon. And I mean in the coming days here. So make sure on the mailing list, keep an eye out keep your eyes peeled for email. I would love to have you with us. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here. I'll be with you soon.